You are listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. This episode is a highlight clip from this week's full episode. To listen in on the complete conversation, see the show notes for the link to the complete show. You can help us out by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate every bit of your support. I'm Morgan McKittrick, your producer, and this is Decidedly.
It turns out the desire to be in the media isn't by itself a qualifier.
For sure.
So what we'll do is we'll work with people to develop initiatives that take their story and kind of are filtered around their story or become a vehicle to make what they're doing more newsworthy and get them into the news cycle and sort of tell their stories. So it's part of it is, developing, the right messaging and saying the right things or avoiding saying the wrong things. Some of it is crisis communications. The number one rule of which the main thing you need to know about crisis communications is stop talking. And, sometimes it's more, sort of involved, it's more strategic in nature of, if let's go and sort of take this program and execute this program and then promote that into the public discourse.
I think knowing when to shut up is key. It's like, on those crisis communication, sometimes the best thing you can do is do nothing. You mentioned one of the things that you said kind of early on, you said, sometimes the story is what they didn't do. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's, you're being accused of something or you're being, you're being attacked in some way or, you have what's really sort of in vogue now is, you have an employee who has their interpretation of what happened and they go and put it on social media and then the reporter picks that up and, their interpretation happens to fit with the dominant narratives and that are popular and make for good copy for reporters. They just don't happen to be true. And, navigating those kinds of situations.
Well, is it better to just say, hey, that's a pack of lies or that, that didn't happen or what do you, how do you approach it?
It depends. It all depends on the situation. A lot of times it's going to be, I guess it's a question of how far off of their interpretation are they because, sometimes you have that individual's interpretation of what happened, but yet the underlying facts may still be problematic for you as well. Even if that interpretation is wrong, you can still be in trouble. And so it's really situational. I think that's the art form of knowing when to speak and knowing when to stop talking. That's one of the time-tested reporter tricks is they'll just stop talking and let all of this dead silence, hang out there. And human instinct is to try and fill that silence. And so then you'll start talking and say all kinds of things that you may have regretted, wish you hadn't.
What are some of the things that you're seeing that companies are getting accused of that they're having the most difficult time deciding how to respond to?
Well, I think just broadly, it's very geographic. Depends on where you're at. You're going to have various pieces or various sides of the culture wars. It's, I think it's increasingly difficult for businesses to stay out or above of that because you've kind of graduated, several generations of college students who have been sort of led to believe that it is their business's obligation or their CEO or their executives or their company's obligations to be on the political field and engaging in these culture wars. So you get a lot of pressure, from that direction. But the other thing that I think, particularly smaller, companies may not kind of realize is that every single decision you make in your business is in some way a communications decision because all your employees have Twitter and camera phones in their pockets and, and so every decision you make, every policy you institute, you should be thinking in the back of your mind that this is going to be public. And if you don't feel like you have a solid footing, then you may want to reconsider those policies. And so I think a lot of people find themselves unexpectedly in the middle of a story that they never sought out and just didn't see coming. And here's where we're at. And I think what they've done is what we've advised a lot of different companies on doing is you have to decide what values you're going to stand on. Because in these moments, what it is you have a group of people who are trying to say, these are the standards that you should be held to, and you've run afoul of them, so therefore you should do whatever. And the question is do you as a company, do you as an individual, as a leader in that company, accept those standards? If you don't accept those standards, then what are your standards? And so you have to know kind of what your standards are, believe those standards are acceptable, believe those standards are right, and then be unyielding on them. And that's what you see. I think you've seen Netflix ultimately come around to is, here's our standards. We think those standards are acceptable. We believe those standards are appropriate and right. And we're standing on those standards. And if you're not down with it, then this may not be the place for you, but we wish you the best of luck. And so it's about
Right.
kind of, are you deciding your standards and your values? Are you allowing someone else to assign them and hold you to their standards? Because then it becomes sort of a never ending, extortionate kind of a relationship.
Sure. And I think you could make the case that there's a shorter line to the business revenue and the business creation and product on the Netflix example, that they can't allow employees to be dictating creative content, as opposed to an example like the MyPillow guy that, election issues have nothing to do with selling pillows and slippers.
Right.
for example.
Yeah, and he ultimately, I don't know what went, behind Walmart's decision to cut him loose. One can guess, but it was never really kind of something Walmart, I think, smartly never really got into and talked about. It was a business decision. We're no longer doing business with that guy.
Well, they may be better off not explaining it, to just shut up and go, yeah, we're just not going to do it anymore without they don't have to come out with a big statement. I think there were some other retailers that made the same decision, but
without a doubt, they were 100%, pitch perfect in not engaging that conversation, because there's no, but that gets back into the question of, why are you doing this? Now, if you're a company that has made that decision because you really want to signal to the audiences that you're virtuous and we're taking a stand against this nonsense and blah, 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 then you engage that. Because that's what you're out to get. If this is a business decision and you want to cut your losses and get separated from this guy, but you don't want to dwell and live in this moment, you cut him loose. It's a business decision. That's all we have to say about it. Next question.
Well, I think there's another example when you think about the position that Nike took on Colin Kaepernick a few years ago on kneeling during the national anthem, and they really leaned into the support for him. And my guess is that the calculus was that, hey, this is going to really rub some people the wrong way. Some people are really going to like what we're doing. And my guess is, because Nike's not a stupid company, that they had done the calculation to say the people that this is going to alienate are likely not our primary target market anyway. And that if we're running against the values of these people who are not our target market, the drop in revenue from that is going to be minimal to the gain in revenue that people who are aligned with our values that we're going to see increase in revenue from. I'm guessing that was the calculus they had to do.
Yeah, you would assume that there's all sorts of smart arithmetic that goes into making these decisions, and I think sometimes there probably is. I also think that it's a strength of brand issue. If you're Nike and, the, kids who buy your shoes, how much do they really care one way or the other about this? They still want the latest, hippest, coolest shoes, and mommy's still going to buy them for them. And, I think there are certain, risk calculations that would go into that. But, I also think that it's, there are different issues to sort of engage on. And people will, perhaps for a time, maybe pass on the next pair of shoes, but they'll be back to your Nikes. And that's really the model that has kind of, I think, encouraged a lot more businesses to go this way. But then you have other instances like, what was it back, I don't know, a month or two ago, You have DuckDuckGo, the CEO, come out with a long sort of set of tweets around, how they're censoring COVID misinformation. And I mean, and that dude just got absolutely blown up. Like when your
I didn't see
brand
the
is
story.
that
What
we're,
happened?
yeah, I mean, he got blown up. I mean, he was ratioed on Twitter, and it was just, I mean, he was ended up kind of having to backtrack on it. But he came out with all of this sort of moral, vim and vigor of, by God, the COVID misinformation, and we're down, down ranking results. Basically, he says they're manipulating the results away from information they deemed to be, misinformation around, I think it was Ukraine or COVID. I forget which one it was. Maybe in Ukraine. But he was all filled with moral righteousness, and he rolled that out. And then the reality is, like, dude, like your whole house of cards is built on being like not Google, on being not that guy, on being this uber privacy, freedom oriented search engine. And when you take a position like that is so at odds with your whole brand, you're in a very different category of very different kettle of fish than say like a Nike picking up for
So
Kaepernick.
what was the blowback on that guy?
Well, the fact that the whole brand was supposedly committed to your privacy and accuracy, and we just do the results, and we're not manipulating the results like Google. And all of a sudden, you went out in a series of tweets and told the world that was all BS.
You were manipulating the results.
Yeah, it's like, we're just like everybody else. And,
dumbass.
and what you've seen since then is one of, I think, the greatest creative concepts that's out there right now, which is DuckDuckGo. They have an ad promoting DuckDuckGo, which is set to the theme of what was it, the old Police song, "Every step you take, every breath you take, I'll be watching you." And it's got a dude in a Google t-shirt overlooking everybody's shoulder the whole time. And I don't know this for fact, but I have to believe that whatever they're spending on that ad campaign is in some way linked to that series of tweets that just absolutely undermined the whole premise for their brand.
Yeah, that sounds like just a stupid move.
Well, and it gets back to the question of why do you do things? Why? Yeah, and all these business owners asking yourself of, why am I considering engaging this? Why does it need to be my brand? Why can't it be me? Why am I willing to? Have I done the calculations? I think this makes dollars and cents. Do I not care what those calculations are? I just believe so fervently in it. Why are you engaging? And I think a lot of times people just get caught up in the emotion of the moment and don't go through this process.
Well, that goes back to the point is that my guess is that there was no calculation done in that. He's just out there spouting off, and had he stopped to think just a beat, hey, do I really want to do this and make this statement that flies in the face of the brand name I'm trying to create, that he wouldn't have done it. And so isn't the better decision to just shut up? Why is he on Twitter saying that stuff anyway?
Right. And I personally, my theory is that these search engines and these tech, as many sins as they probably are culpable of in the world of manipulating stuff and bias in politics, I think they are under immense pressure out of DOJ, State Department, out of government officials on these issues on Ukraine, because there's an immense amount of let's just say, I don't want to call it propaganda. Let's just say there was a very uniform message being delivered on Ukraine very early on, and that has to be enforced. Yeah. And so I think there are a lot of things probably behind the scenes, a lot of pressures that we're not privy to, that people like that react to, in which they kind of get pushed into directions. Maybe he got caught up in it. Maybe, who knows? Because at the end of the day, CEOs, all these people, they're just people. And, we all have said and done things we wish we had back, or a moment we wish we'd, decision we wish we had back. And that's why I think it's important to have people around you, and, don't pick up your phone and go at it until you've had a conversation with some objective people around you that are, willing to kind of point out and ask the questions of what is the objective of doing this? What do we hope to, what return do we hope to get on this? Because let me tell you what the potential costs are going to be.
Thanks for making the great decision to listen in to this week's episode highlight. If you want more of what you just heard, see the show notes for the full episode. As always, for the latest decision-making tips, find us on decidedlypodcast.com or on Instagram @decidedlypodcast. And be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter from the link in the show notes. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review as well. We read all of your comments, so if you learned some decision-making tips today, let us know. Until next time, this is Decidedly.